In Colombia, the social mobilization known as MINGA is heading to Bogota and demand government respect for their fundamental rights. Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden criticizes Trump's inaction in the face of the pandemic at a town hall event. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres warns that the COVID-19 pandemic has intensified food insecurity to a level not seen in decades. From the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm Gladys Quesada. In Colombia, the social mobilization known as MINGA is heading to Bogota to demand government respect for their fundamental rights and to denounce Iván Duque's criminalization of their demonstrations. The campesino and indigenous organizations also condemns the social and economic politics of Duque's administration and demands a meeting with the president. The demonstrators aim to establish a dialogue with Duque in order to put an end to the systematic violence in the nation. In this regard, the spokesperson of the MINGA said the organization will join the national strike scheduled for October 21st. And the Ombudsman Office of Colombia offered its headquarters in Bogota so President Iván Duque can meet with thousands of indigenous people and farmers who are marching towards the city as part of the collective action in defense of life, territory, democracy, justice and peace, MINGA. The proposal came shortly after the Bogota-based National University announced that it will not open the campus doors to receive the MINGA. The Ombudsman's Office announced its offer also while the national government threatened not to receive the indigenous movement, which is formed by over 8,000 people at the capital's entrance. The march is expected to arrive in Bogota on Monday. The president of the Supreme Electoral Court of Bolivia invited voters to participate in the October 18 general elections, guaranteeing that the people will have access to all of the voting records.
The Supreme Electoral Court has worked throughout with technical seriousness, political impartiality and transparency, so that we have a proper electoral process, where the basic principle is that the will of the people, expressed in the polls, be reflected in the results of the elections. We invite all citizens to go and vote in an atmosphere of tranquility and serenity, with security and confident that the electoral process is legitimate, transparent and reliable. We must regain confidence in the electoral authority and the electoral process because we have worked properly.
In Argentina, health authorities reported Thursday more than 400 deaths in the last 24 hours. The South American nation's death toll now stands at more than 25,300. Argentina also registered over 17,000 new COVID-19 cases in the last 24 hours, setting a record for new daily cases in the country. So far, Argentina has confirmed over 949,000 cases of the infection. As authorities and experts warned a few days ago, the number of cases continues to grow in the interior of the country, where a stronger testing program is being implemented. The Health Ministry of Colombia confirmed nearly 7,000 new COVID-19 cases in the last 24 hours. The South American country has reported nearly 937,000 cases of the infection since the beginning of the pandemic in Colombia. According to the Health Ministry, 151 people died of COVID-19 in the last 24 hours, bringing the nation's death toll to over 28,500. On a positive note, the health authority reported that more than 826,000 patients have recovered from the disease. Mexico's President Andrés Manuel López Obrador, AMLO, announced on Thursday that his administration is requesting that private hospitals offer free care to those affected by the novel coronavirus. He referred to a new stage in the country, which will consist on the conversion of some public hospitals into specialized COVID-19 centers, with support provided by private institutions. The leftist leader also explained that such an agreement would involve the government paying for services, so that all citizens will have access to care regardless of their economic situation. In April, the AMLO administration signed a collaboration agreement with the National Association of Private Hospitals and the Mexican Hospital Consortium that was meant to address the care deficit faced by the public health system with the arrival of the pandemic in the country. Copa Airlines announces 2 flights from Havana to Panama on October 21st and 29th. According to Nelson Cabrera, sales executive, the tickets are available for purchase on the company's website and offices. Flight number CM0372 will depart from Havana at 3 p.m. on local time on the 21st. Once the island territory, it connects to airports in Colombia, Brazil, Ecuador, United States, Mexico, Uruguay, Chile, and Canada. Meanwhile, the second flight, under the same number, will have operations in Sao Paulo, Guayaquil, New York, Florida, Mexico City, and Santiago de Chile. All national travelers, foreign residents, and tourists must present a negative COVID-19 test taken 48 hours before the date of travel. The Sao Paulo Forum SPF recalled virtually the 5th anniversary of the victory of Salvador Allende and the Popular Unity Political Alliance in Chile on September 4, 1970. Mónica Valente, Executive Secretary of the Sao Paulo Forum, posted on Twitter the significance of Allende's victory. The event is organized in conjunction with Chilean forces that are members of the SPF. This forum was founded in 1990 at the initiative of the leader of the Cuban Revolution, Fidel Castro, and former Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, Valente said. The call posted on Forum's official website informed that political leaders from several continents, such as Cuban legislator and Casa de las Americas President Abel Prieto, attended this event. And we'll be right back after this very short break, so don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. Former Vice President and Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden spoke at a town hall event. The event takes place on the original scheduled date for the second presidential debate, which was cancelled after U.S. President Donald Trump refused to accept a virtual debate following his coronavirus diagnosis.
We make up 4% of the world's population. We have 20% of the world's deaths. We're in a situation where we have 210,000+ people dead. And what's he doing? Nothing. He's still not wearing masks and so on. And we are a country that is a country of slaves who came here 400 years ago, indigenous people, and everyone else is an immigrant. And we're a diverse country. And unless we are able to treat people equally, we're just never going to meet our potential. But I think the American people want to see that happen. I think they're ready to see it happen. And I tell you one thing, if I'm elected president, you will not hear me race baiting, you'll not hear me dividing, you'll hear me trying to unify.
On Friday, China's Foreign Ministry accused Mike Pompeo of slandering the Confucius Institutes of ideological prejudice and also personal political interests after the U.S. Secretary of State called for the closure of all the Chinese government-backed education centers in the U.S.
Certain American politicians, such as Mike Pompeo, slander the Confucius Institute out of ideological prejudice and personal political interest, obstructed its normal operation in the U.S., and deliberately undermine the cultural and educational exchanges and cooperation between China and the U.S. It seriously violates the aspiration of the two peoples and is bound to suffer resolute resistance from people of inside the U.S. Adrian Sands is a notorious anti-China gunman recruited by the United States. I hope and believe that the international community can distinguish right from wrong and not be fooled by these liars. The so-called China's persecution of Xinjiang Muslims and crimes against humanity is a sensational story concocted by some anti-China forces on purpose. It is a farce that slanders and smears China for the purpose of containing and suppressing China.
And UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson said Friday that he keeps the door open to more Brexit talks, but insists Britain is ready to slam it shut unless the EU offers fundamental tactic change.
And from the outset, we were totally clear that we wanted nothing more complicated than a Canada-style relationship based on friendship and free trade. To judge by the latest EU summit in Brussels, that won't work for our EU partners. They want the continued ability to control our legislative freedom, our fisheries, in a way that is completely unacceptable to an independent country. And since we have only 10 weeks until the end of the transition period on January the 1st, I have to make a judgment about the likely outcome and to get us all ready. And given that they have refused to negotiate seriously for much of the last few months, and given that this summit appears explicitly to rule out a Canada-style deal, I've concluded that we should get ready for January the 1st with arrangements that are more like Australia's, based on simple principles of global free trade.
The Czech Republic Health Minister said on Friday that the country should brace for a huge influx of COVID-19 infections over at least the next 10 days to 2 weeks. Coronavirus infections in the hard-hit Czech Republic have reached a new record of confirmed cases in one day for the second consecutive day. The Health Ministry reported more than 9,700 new cases in the last 24 hours. To date, the nation of over 10 million has confirmed over 149,000 COVID-19 cases. 50,000 of them were registered last week. The nation's death toll stands at more than 1,200. Hospitals across the country have postponed unnecessary planned operations to focus on the growing number of COVID-19 patients.
There are about 3 weeks ahead of us with the growing number of patients. I just hope that the increase won't last the entire 3 weeks, but it is for sure the growth would last at least 10 days to 2 weeks. We have to get the health system ready for the huge influx that we are awaiting. I would like to thank all the health personnel that are on the front line who are doing a great job and who are already now almost overwhelmed. And I would like to call on them to keep working as they have done, to keep working to be able to cope with the pressure that is still ahead of us, because we need a maximum capacity of beds. As I declared before, we have already doubled the capacity.
On Friday, Finland's Prime Minister Sanna Marin left the European Union Summit of Head of States and Governments in Belgium as precautionary measure after learning that a Finnish lawmaker she recently attended a meeting with tested positive for the COVID-19. The move came one day after European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen left the summit, the venue in Brussels, shortly after the talks began because one of her close staffers tested positive for the disease as well. 2 other EU top officials, Josep Borrell and Janez Lenarich, went into isolation this week after coming into contact with people who tested positive for the virus during a trip to Ethiopia. And the Kingdom of Morocco will recover at the end of this month almost 3 tons of archaeological objects seized at customs where traffickers tried to introduce them into France, the media reported in France this Friday. The 25,000 pieces, whose return took almost 3 decades, include, among others, fossil remains of animals, geological and engraved plates from the Neolithic period, prior to the time in which humans began to express themselves in writing, according to the description in the media. The objects were delivered in an official ceremony held at the Museum of Mediterranean Cultures in the French city of Marseille. The theft of pieces of archaeological and historical value is widespread practice since the time of European colonial rule in African, Arab and American countries. And we have more stories coming up after this final break, so stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. The COVID-19 pandemic has further intensified food insecurity to a level not seen in decades, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres warned on Friday. In a World Food Day video message, the UN chief stressed that in a world of plenty, it is a grave affront that hundreds of millions go to bed hungry each night. In a World Food Day video message, he also said that it is grave that people is in famines, in hungries, and also go to bed hungry each night. Some 130 million people are in risk of being pushed to the brink of starvation by the end of this year, and this is on top of the 690 million people who already lack enough to eat, he said. Guterres announced that next year he will convene a food system summit to inspire action towards this vision. The Portuguese diplomat stressed, "We need food systems that provide decent, safe livelihoods for workers. We have to know how the capacity to create a more resilient, equitable and sustainable world." The Syrian Ministry of Health reported on Friday some 4,931 COVID-19 cases since the pandemic was detected in this nation on March 22. In the last 24 hours, some 48 new patients were registered with the virus, a figure lower than the daily average of the last 3 weeks, the ministry report states. Over 1,100 patients have recovered from the disease, while 4 people died in the last few hours, totaling 238 deaths so far. Syria maintains a complete lockdown and limits access to workplaces, commercial centers, service centers and religious institutions. All education levels were resumed with strict preventive measures. On Friday, Kyrgyzstan's former and active presidents addressed parliament to end a political crisis over a disputed October vote, which electoral authorities said could be repeated before the end of the year.
I will try to use my accumulated presidential experience for the benefit of the people. Thank God we didn't allow lootings or a coup to occur. The government is changing peacefully, and we should be grateful to God for that. It has never happened in the history of the country that the power of the president, prime minister and parliament was in the hands of one person. It will be fair that the president has no right to run, so that no one can abuse his status, and it is stated in the constitution. I will try to use my accumulated.
On Thursday, Sooronbay Jevhenkov became the third Kyrgyz president to resign since 2005. Jevhenkov believes that his resignation will spare the country further bloodshed. His parliamentary elections results on October 4th sparked confrontations between the police and protesters, in which one person died and more than 1,200 were injured. And more than 350 prisoners were freed on Friday in the second day of a landmark exchange between the warring sides in Yemen. The prisoner swap is a rare sign of progress in efforts to end the conflict in Yemen. Aircrafts arranged by the International Committee of the Red Cross shuttled between Sana'a and Yemen's second city, Aden, ferrying released prisoners. The ECRC tasked with the logistics of the complex 2 days exchange said that on Thursday it flew more than 700 freed detainees to cities in both Yemen and neighboring Saudi Arabia. The warring sides agreed last month in Switzerland to release over 1,000 prisoners over the 2 years. Several areas in central Vietnam are still submerged and flooded, with local residents relying on relief aid and food and clean water. 2 storms in a week have brought devastating rains to parts of central and northern Vietnam. Close to 1 million people have been impacted by heavy downpours and rising waters. Authorities say on Thursday that 9 members of a rescue team were found dead after trying to save workers from a hydropower plant engulfed in a landslide in central Vietnam. Officials stated that at least 40 people have died in last week's flooding and landslides. Cambodia has also been badly hit by floods. According to the Cambodian National Community for Disaster Management, 13 people have been killed, including 5 children. The Cuban Fund for Cultural Assets is currently promoting the Matria photographic exhibition by the Cuban artist Gabriel Dávalos, which unites image and dance as protagonists in the honor of the prima ballerina Soluta Alicia Alonso. With images from this collection, we conclude this emission of From the South. Remember that you can find this and many other stories in our website at telesurenglish.net. And also you can join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and Telegram. For Telesur English, I'm Gladys Quesada, and thank you for watching.